Okay.
Okay, I'm pressing it. All right. Pressed. Okay, we are live. It's been a while. Hello, YouTube channel followers and also patrons in the Discord. What's it called that we're doing on Discord?
A stage
Members. This is exciting. Brian, we're doing a show together. How long has it been?
Years.
And like when we did do shows years ago, they were like about drafting, like other people filled in the content. This is like a true like classic. We have a bunch of topics to discuss. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I hope that we remember how to do this, but okay.
Barely. I'm already struggling to talk.
Okay, well, that's okay. You've already got your notes, so as long as you'll be able to read.
Yeah, I just need to read.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start the recording now. So
hey, Tidbits, Shams, and Sammy J.
So ready? I'll count down from 3.
I'm gonna say yes in the way that doesn't make you feel confident.
Okay, so say yes when you're actually ready, and then we'll do it.
Closing some tabs here.
Good one. Good call.
It's really important for me.
Well, you don't want too many tabs to block you from doing your best work.
I want to be tab blocked. Okay. You want to start the recording?
Yeah, I do. I'd love to.
Here we go.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, record.
Done. Might have been like a half second late.
It's okay. I'll fix it in post.
Oh wow, recording in progress.
Okay, I'm recording. Oh yeah, Brian, is it okay with you if I record the Zoom call?
I don't consent.
It might be tricky to do this show then. I could just like have my side recorded and release it, and then while you're talking afterwards, I could like record and post like my summaries of all the things you said.
This is where Brian said, or you could just say it word for word.
Yeah, I could be like, Brian said, Elon, brilliant point. I actually have nothing to add. Everything you said, I agree with 100%. So why don't we just move forward?
Or you can just leave it blank and let the listeners fill in their own thoughts.
Kind of like a nice.
That's how you bring the listener voice into the show.
It's kind of like a high concept podcast.
Yeah.
It's like you give your own advice to yourself.
That could be fun.
Maybe one day. One day, if you're sick last minute, I'll just continue. I'll just do it myself.
You'll just do the show anyway, and it'll be a fill in the blanks, like a Mad Libs.
Okay, well, I guess people can let us know in the chat what they think about that idea.
Or you could get like AI to like learn my voice and vocal patterns.
Yeah, that's probably not too hard at this point.
Did you see that they did that with this Anthony Bourdain documentary? I just like came across this. I'm not like passionate about anything, but like he died, right?
That's sad.
But there's a documentary coming out where there's a moment where he reads a letter that he wrote about like maybe feeling depressed, except he never read it out loud.
So they got an AI to get him to read it.
Yeah. That's
wild.
Exactly. And I think there was also something about like them stitching together sentences because they had him saying like every word in the English language that he uses. And so stitching it together and then maybe running it through AI to make it sound natural. It's crazy. Make dead people talk, say things they never said.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want that to happen to me. So if I go before you, Brian, well, I want you at least while you're alive to try to keep that from happening. Don't keeping Karlsson going without me. I don't like that. I don't.
Not with AI, Elon. Wouldn't you like that? You would. The show would just continue.
No,
march on.
I want it to continue with another host, and then people will be like, "Man, I really think it was better with that old host. What happened to that guy?"
Oh, instead of like you just being like performing words and be like, "Wow, Elon's really lost that special something."
Where he's got to get off the sauce.
Is your actual life?
Yeah. All right, we got a lot to get to. Let's get the show going. So thanks everyone for joining. We're gonna record a podcast now, but obviously please share your thoughts in the chat as we go, and we'll try to get to them. It's gonna be fun.
Hey Josh and Stefan, just want to say hi to everybody in the chat. It's nice. Honestly, it's nice to see the crew. It's been so long. So it's
some people are like new to the crew, right? Like Sammy's been big in the Discord lately. Was this Sammy's first time joining us on the chat or no? I don't know.
Well, I don't think first time joining in the YouTube chat, but Sammy's definitely coming on strong as a community member.
Yeah, votes Appreciate every time
in
the rankings. That's how I know now who are the active patrons. It's whoever's voting. Brian's not one of the most active patrons.
Hey, I got back in.
Yeah, you voted for what, Kyle Connor?
No, I voted for Tavares.
Over Pedersen, eh? I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Pedersen has a higher ceiling. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, he has a higher ceiling. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm not worried
shoots
about
more
Pedersen.
Too.
All right, let's start the show.
I thought there was something else I want to say.
Okay. Well,
say it on the show. Yeah, I was gonna say my participation is better than it ever has been.
That's true. No, I was joking, but I love that you're participating.
This one out every year. I just like this is everyone else's choice everyone else's time to weigh in.
I wonder if it hurt Dave's feelings at the time, but I really appreciate that you're doing it while I run it.
I'll have to make sure he's good with it. All right, let's get this party started. Okay. What if we had a podcast expansion draft?
I'll make a joke about that in the
Who would be exposed, you or me?
Ben and Lewis. Okay, let's start. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who are really hoping that Ben and Lewis don't get claimed in the podcast West Coast expansion draft. I don't know. That was off the top of my head here and didn't work. Really hoping Ben and Lewis don't get claimed.
Why don't you just say we've exposed all the teams have released their protected lists. Ben and Lewis were leaving unprotected and just hoping Seattle doesn't claim them as podcasters of their own.
Okay, I'm gonna try it again.
Okay.
Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who are hoping that Ben and Lewis won't get claimed in the podcast expansion draft. I think it's okay. By the way, Ben has a bit of a knee injury, so if you take him, I don't know if he's actually going to be able to podcast next year, so you might want to stay away. Whatever time. Okay, I'm your host, Dylan Dubrowski. We've got a really fun show for you today, and of course, with me to break everything down from the past week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of NHL action behind the scenes, it's Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Yeah, Ben has this nagging injury that he worked through over the last 2 months of his best podcasting. Just as nagging. We're not sure if he's going to be able to podcast for the first half of next season because of it. So Seattle might want to hold off. And Lewis, nobody wants his contract. Just take my word for that. I'm really happy to be here with you, Elon. It's been a while. I have, of course, been enjoying your 32 Beat series, which I don't need to advertise on the show because everybody listening to us has hopefully been listening to all of those amazing interviews full of these really inside baseball nuggets that you're getting from each team's beat writers, the people who watch them, think about them, and write about them the most. They make us seem like fair weather hockey fans with their knowledge on each team. So I'm really excited. And Elon, of course, you're doing a great job interviewing. But enough of that. I'm excited. I love that you said to talk about all this NHL action that's happened since the Stanley Cup has been awarded. I loved yesterday afternoon. I actually was offline and then I got online again, right after all the trades had happened. It's what is this? That's what the trade deadline used to be like. And I hereby declare I would love an expansion draft every single season.
I'll respond. There's some noises on your side. I don't know. Do you hear that? Oh, the window is open. Is that it? Hello? I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I could get away with it.
Wow. Okay. I mean, we could be the Dimitri podcast with cars driving by. Okay, yeah, I'll respond.
Well, I'm just gonna be sweating buckets here. So.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I apologize.
You don't care.
I mean, I want. Okay. I meant I don't care. Okay, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of like the trade deadline, but without 2 or 3 weeks of rumors going into it so that you're eventually disappointed. Yeah, it was just a kind of random trades that we weren't expecting. Plus all the big names exposed for the expansion draft to Seattle that came out just today. We're recording this Sunday night. So Brian, I'm thinking for this show, we'll quickly go over the Seattle thing. I mean, this is a fantasy hockey podcast, right? So we can't really talk about the fantasy impact of players being exposed. Obviously, we'll do a show once Seattle actually has a team and we can start projecting how we think these players are going to do on their new team. I thought it'd be fun to just quickly break down the exposed players. Then we'll get into breaking down a bunch of the trades and, signings or actually mostly releasings from contracts that have happened over the last few weeks that may actually have some fantasy relevance for all of you. But yeah, I wanted to just talk quickly about these exposed names. But actually, first, let's mention that we're presented by DobberHockey.com, the number one fantasy hockey website in the world. And I used Frozen tools extensively to prep the show and all those beat writer episodes. Check out DobberHockey.com. But okay, now these exposed names. I'm just going to run through the list of the names that jumped out at me. Maybe we could take turns, I don't know, and maybe give quick comments about it. To me, high level, Seattle could be really good next year, right? Like there's a really strong list of players, and we've had some patrons, like Don Lucian. Lots of people have been tweeting how they've gone through the exercise of trying to put the team together, and they are able to make cap compliant, strong looking teams, like teams that I expect to be a lot better than Anaheim and LA and Buffalo next year. So yeah, right off the bat, Vladimir Tarasenko is exposed. What? That's wild. He's got 2 years left on that $7.5 million contract. Sure, there's this injury situation. We don't know if he's going to play next year, but it's pretty wild that they're going to be able to get a superstar like him. I guess there's also Vince Dunn. So St. Louis is going to lose a good player. I guess they're hoping to lose Tarasenko at this point. But yeah, I was blown away by the Tarasenko being exposed.
Well, we weren't so blown away after we read about how his relationship with the team was basically irreparable based on what had gone on over the last couple of years with the way they treated his injury and handled him and did or didn't give him the right opportunities to play or to heal. And there was also very quietly behind all that talk, some murmur about how he was upset that he wasn't given the opportunity to be the captain. When that opportunity came up, he felt he'd been around long enough, he deserved a look, and didn't get it. So honestly, it sounds like there's been a lot going on in the background, and that he has played his last game for St. Louis, which is crazy because he was the happiest guy in the world, 2-3 years ago, winning the cup for them. And here he is now. And the team, I don't think anybody wants a piece of the other. So on one hand, St. Louis could solve that problem by Seattle just claiming him, and that $7.5 million over the next 2 years. St. Louis doesn't need to worry about him anymore, but they don't get anything back for him, which is crazy. Imagine us having this conversation 2 or 3 years ago saying St. Louis is going to just give away Vladimir Tarasenko. Even with that contract, he could very well be worth it. So I'm very curious to see, because Vince Dunn is also a pretty serviceable defenseman and does have the ability to quarterback a top power play if he's put in that position. So Seattle has a choice here. And honestly, if I'm them, I might say, okay, I'm going to take Dunn, and then I'm going to negotiate to see if I can make a deal for Tarasenko, because so far St. Louis is so nonplussed by the offers they've seen. They're willing to just expose him for nothing. So you have to think that it won't take much to beat the best offer they've gotten so far if they would just be happy to be rid of him, period. So I'll be curious to see how Seattle approaches that situation. And it's wild to think about Vladimir Tarasenko not on St. Louis, and St. Louis not having Vladimir Tarasenko.
Yeah, I mean, I said, I'm not necessarily surprised that he's not going to be back with St. Louis. Like you said, we've known this for a little while now, but I just thought that they would be able to trade him and get something for him. You make a good point. Hey, remember last expansion draft, somehow Vegas was able to get both Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith from the Florida Panthers. So maybe it could be a similar situation, get both Tarasenko and Dunn from St. Louis. The other really big news, which we were kind of joking about clunkily at the start of the show, Carey Price exposed, which was also something very unexpected. Of course, he's got that huge $10 million contract for still 4 more years. Now news just came out right before we started recording that now Montreal's saying he's injured, which is obviously I hope he's okay, and he's apparently going to go check with a doctor. It is kind of funny to me, just it seems like a move a team can make. I feel like Minnesota has to expose Kaapo Kakkonen. Well, they could have also exposed Cam Talbot, which is probably what I would have done, but regardless, they have to expose one of these really good goalies. You imagine that they're busy nothing. Oh, we can do that. Maybe write a press conference oh, Kakkonen's I don't know about his situation for next year, and maybe that's a strategic way to keep a player from getting taken. Obviously, I know the league wouldn't allow that. And by the way, Ben isn't actually injured. Ben, also for new listeners, is someone who does shows called short shifts with Lewis during the regular season. But okay, so yeah, Carey Price on Montreal, that's going to be wild. Brian, I'll throw a bunch of names at you, then you can sort of comment in full. So JVR and Voracek and Gostisbehere all exposed from Philly. So Seattle's going to get a good player from Philly. It'll be interesting to see where they go there. Also, two exciting, when I say exciting, I mean, players who have been stars, players we've talked about a lot on Keeping Karlsson in the past, having tremendous fantasy relevance. So Eberle and Bailey from, the Islanders, Palat, Killorn, Gourde, all available from Tampa Bay. Max Domi from Columbus. These are just forwards. I'll get to some defensemen after, but like of these forwards already, like, oh, Duchesne or Johansson or Calle Yarncroc from Nashville, depending on if they want to take a big contract. So yes, some like potential for some big name forwards that Seattle can get to fill out their top 6, maybe even top 9.
For sure. So to start with, I'm going to go back to the goalie. You mentioned Carey Price, and I just don't think that we should trust. This is going to get stale really fast, right? This podcast, by the time you hear that you're hearing this, there might have been 3 or 4 more just random pieces of information leaked by various media members who had them leaked from Montreal or Seattle front offices. You know, we heard that Seattle was going to do a deep analytical dive on Carey Price just to, you know, maybe put a little fear into Montreal that, oh, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we need to do something to make sure Seattle doesn't draft Carey Price. And then Montreal counters by saying, actually, he might miss a chunk of the start of the season. Carey actually suggested that we expose him because otherwise we'd lose Jake Allen. And with Carey injured with this hip thing that's obviously been bothering him forever and was always going to mean he missed a lot of time. If without Jake Allen in the picture, the Habs will have no goalie. So
Caden Primo, baby.
Yeah. Okay. Like, yeah, I would love to see him get a shot for sure. I'm not saying that can't happen, but that wouldn't be the Canadians' number one preference to go in with him as their only goalie who might be NHL caliber. So it'll be really interesting to watch this chess match play out through the media. Sometimes I wonder, Elon, how much we have, you know, some voices really stepping up in this conversation. Of course, you've got, oh my God, what's his name? Pierre. I'm blanking. Sorry.
LeBrun.
Yeah, thanks. Got Pierre LeBrun and Frank Saravalli being some of the bigger voices so far. And I actually wonder how much they really know, if they know more than anyone, because they're hearing info from both teams. They might have a better way to tell how much of it is smoke and mirrors and how much of it is real. Anyway, I'm in it for the content, this whole Carey Price exposure thing. It's been a lot of fun to follow, and it's actually added a lot of nice spice to the Seattle expansion draft that didn't even need to be there, but it's like the cherry on top. So I'm happy to just take that ride. You mentioned Jonathan Drouin, Elon, who
I didn't.
Oh, I thought you did.
Just because I wrote it doesn't mean I said it.
It wasn't even okay. So I'll just say. The Habs have also exposed Jonathan Drouin, who we'll see if Seattle thinks a fresh start is going to help him. Of course, there's a lot going on with Drouin or not going on. We don't know anything about why he was absent from the team for so long. So we'll just let that situation be and see what Seattle chooses to do. You mentioned those Flyers, JVR, Voracek, and Gostisbehere. Well, they've been trying to shop Voracek and Gostisbehere actively, openly for a while now. So that's no surprise. I'm guessing that they'd rather hold on to JVR, but wouldn't be sad to see his $7 million go. Although I think Ron Francis has made it pretty clear that having cap space is something like that's flexibility he sees as a weapon for his expansion team. So taking on JVR at $7 million doesn't seem like a great way to use it. I'm not sure they'll take either of those 3 guys, even though Philly would love it if they did. Love, so on brand for the Islanders to expose Eberle and Bailey over Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck, which is just, I mean, there's a lot of takes on this, obviously, but mine is that the Islanders have to be aware that in a million years, if they exposed Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck, Seattle would not take them or their contracts. So they probably could have kept Eberle and Bailey. This almost tells me that they'd probably be happy to get out from under these contracts just a little bit, or they are just so blinded for their love of these 4th line players, which we've seen be true before. Max Domi, you mentioned he's exposed in Columbus. He was left exposed instead of guys like Eric Robinson and Jack Roslovic and Gustav Nyquist, who are protected. So this is a pretty big fall from grace for Max Domi, but it's not one that we didn't necessarily see coming or find overly surprising. He's had a really underwhelming career so far. So we'll see if this does anything to kickstart that. And then in Tampa, you've got those bunch of guys at $5 million, like Andre Palat, Alex Killorn, Yanni Gourde, and Tyler Johnson. Johnson and Gourde have the longest term. So Seattle's really got to want one of them over Palat and Killorn. to go with them is my guess, but Gord is like the hottest commodity in the league right now after his playoff performance. I wouldn't be surprised if they went there. So that's my take. Oh, you mentioned Duchesne and Johansson Yarncroc. We're gonna talk a little bit more about them later in the show, but for me, this is pretty much like bye-bye Calle Yarncroc, right? They kept I didn't even write his first name and I don't know it offhand. Janot, Luke Kunin, and Alexandre Carrier over Yarncroc, which is like, I doubt Seattle minds. Yarncroc seems like a great guy to bring onto your first year squad. And I think Duchesne and Johansson are the red herrings, the bait that Nashville hopes Seattle will take, but I just don't see it coming. But exposing Yarncroc while protecting Luke Kunin and Alexandre Carrier, and I think it's Taylor Janot, feels like galaxy braining from the Nashville Predators front office, who just are so in love with their own guys that they might not realize. It's like in fantasy, right? When you're so in love with someone on your roster and you never want to drop them, even though this is like me with Jesse Puljujarvi last year, even though no one else was interested in taking them, I dropped other guys that other teams were more interested in instead of Puljujarvi, just because I was so unaware. Like, I had those blinders on, and I just feel like that's what Nashville's doing here.
Yeah, and Calle Yarncroc's only like $2 million for one more year, and then I guess he becomes a UFA. But like, he's definitely someone that he fits the mold of like one of these guys that became a somebody when they got to Vegas. You know, someone who we'd seen like glimpses of being a good player, and now if he gets a more important role, though, then he could do something. But of course, like we've mentioned a lot of players, maybe he doesn't even crack the top 6 depending on who they take. Yeah, and then there's so many players, like, you know, like Dadonov from the Sens, maybe, I don't know. Matt Murray obviously exposed the Sens. I mean, you didn't have to trade for him and sign him, but okay, whatever.
They're two big swings, the two places they spent money. Actually, these were both mistakes. Someone else take them, please.
Yeah, Tanner Janot, by the way, on Nashville.
Oh, I was so close.
Okay, so then on defense, by the way, you think like, okay, they could have good offense, but yeah, they're not going to have any good defense. No, they could have. Okay, Jake Bean is someone who I've started playing Dynasty, as I've mentioned. You know, I'm following some of the prospects. Like, I thought that Jake Bean is supposed to be the next guy. Like, I was thinking, if Dougie Hamilton leaves in UFA, I wonder if this will be Jake Bean time in Carolina, like a potential sleeper. Maybe I think it would be crazy for Seattle not to take this guy since he's available to them. Mark Giordano, I don't know. He only has 1 year left in his contract. That might be a nice veteran guy if they could afford the $6.75 million. Troy Stetcher. Everyone says how Troy Stetcher was really good for Detroit. He's cheap. Claggy from LA, like DeMello from Winnipeg. Like, they could fill out that decor. I don't know if they're going to take PK Subban from New Jersey. He only has 1 year left, but it's like $9 million. And then even like in nets, like the reason why I don't think they should take Carey Price, it's not that I think like Carey Price is like not good or anything. Like, I think Price might have a couple good years left in him, but just like for the amount that they're going to be spending on Carey Price, like they have good options in nets available. Like, there's all this news coming out that Drieger is gonna go to he's a UFA, but apparently they're just gonna pick him anyways, and they've already maybe got something worked out. I don't know. So Drieger had that amazing year last year. Vanacek is available. Kaapo Kakkonen, like I brought up. So like, why take a swing? Or I guess it's not as much of a swing on Carey Price, but like, why spend the money and take the pick of Carey Price when you could get these other goalies who might even be as good as Price? Like, this is obviously the last thing we've seen from Carey Price is that amazing playoff run, but his last couple of regular seasons haven't been so amazing. Oh, Ben Bishop is available. That would be interesting. I guess we don't, obviously, I wonder like what access they have to the doctors over these next few days to like check on all the health statuses, because obviously Ben Bishop missed the whole season. The other name I just want to throw out, Gabriel Landeskog is a UFA, but there's been rumor, like obviously there's a lot of UFAs are exposed. Ovechkin's exposed, but Landeskog's been in the news because apparently, I don't know, maybe they're like talking to him behind the scenes, or like seems like he's like one of the UFAs that they might actually, along with Drieger, like be able to sign somehow, which obviously would be huge. Imagine they have Landeskog and Tarasenko on their top line, centered by, I don't know who's the center who I said. I don't even know. Max Domi. That's not so bad.
No, you could make something of that. You're right. There are the makings of a decent team here. And they're the makings of a decent team here for sure. And I like Jake Bean seems like an obvious thought. And I was reading Sarah Siv's article over the Athletic about why he was exposed, not Brady Shea. Essentially came down to Carolina wants to win now. And Jake Bean isn't someone who they're ready to eat top 4 minutes in key situations. And unfortunately for Carolina, they don't have the time to wait to let that happen this year or next year if they really want to contend, and will take the experienced NHLer in Brady Shea, even if his ceiling is a little lower. And Giordano could be fun for leadership. Stetcher and DeMello both seem like guys who've been around the league for no good reason, like who've always done well where they are, but no team has really latched on hard to them, or as hard as it seems like their numbers should invite teams to latch on. And then in net, I'm 100% with you, Elon. I would argue that Carey Price has never, ever been worth his contract. And that's just because his contract is so high, right? He had a career high 933 save percentage back in 2014-15, 934 the next year. But playoff results those years, unfortunately, didn't come. They were like the first year of that, they got to the second round. He was great, but the team in front of him didn't do their job. And the next year, they didn't even make the playoffs. So for those reasons, I would be concerned. Oh, sorry. It's not that they didn't. Crap. Let me just do that over. I'm going to do that whole thing over. Okay. Or I'm going to start from Carey Price has never been worth his contract.
I don't know if you need to go into this, Carey. We're going to hear from the Habs fans. Like, is there like is there value to this?
Okay, fine. So you just want me to skip that whole part?
If you want to, go ahead. I don't know. I say you better have something interesting to say or something to back it up. Like, not like they didn't make the playoffs.
Okay, fine. I'll just not say it. DeMello and Stetcher. Okay, so I'm going to start from where I finished about them, saying like they should have been invited for more teams to be interested.
Okay.
And for goalies, Elon, I'm with you without wanting to risk the ire of Habs fans who I know have been exposed to a lot of hot takery and have felt a lot over the team's cup run. I've never seen a fan base so like mishkabibbled or discombobulated like while their team goes to the Stanley Cup finals. Like it didn't seem like there was room for celebration or happiness at all. Just it was like an all-out war from that Toronto series all the way through the end, just in the media and on social media. Anyway, I hope Habs fans are feeling some peace and relaxation and aren't too triggered by all this Carey Price talk about Seattle shouldn't even take him. I'm with you, Elon. Get some flexibility by taking on a couple lower priced options like Driedger and Kakinen, who may or may not pan out. But if they don't, you're not saddled with something that's really going to hurt you a few years down the road when it's going to be increasingly important for your team to be competitive, and you're really going to need that cap space and flexibility. So absolutely, you and I have a lot of agreement here. I can't wait to see what Seattle does, and also all the trades that happen. Like it's all going to be unleashed at once, right? About 48 hours from the time we're recording this. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch. I can't wait. Like I said, expansion drafts every year. Let's do it. There used to be an argument that expansion just thinned out the talent of the league and made the whole product less watchable. And I think with the Vegas expansion, we know that's not true now. What I think we learned from the Vegas expansion was that there's a lot of talent in the NHL that never gets the opportunity. Like there are more than like the guys in the NHL can all be in the NHL, but there are more guys outside the NHL who might be better or never got a fair shot. And having more teams is a way to give more guys shots and opportunities to shine. And it's also like back when the argument was being made that expansion thins out the league. This was especially big when, there's a huge expansion with Nashville, Atlantis, Columbus, Minnesota. And I think it came up a bit with Vegas. But at that time, a lot of teams were running fourth lines of goons too, right? Like that was back in the days where the fourth line just came on to fight for 5 minutes. And the third line wasn't always much better. And it felt like, yeah, we can't thin this talent out at all. But look at what we've done. We actually have like teams you have rolling like very competent top nines, fourth lines that do more than just goon it up. And we've added a couple more teams, and there's still, of course you have your teams that are really struggling, but there's enough talent to go around. So it's exciting to know that there could be some gems unearthed in Seattle the same way there were in Vegas.
Yeah, I like that point because it's not only that, yeah, there's enough players outside of the NHL. It's also like there's enough players in the NHL who aren't getting these chances. Like we just talked about Kalle Yarncroc. Like I think of like that top line the first year for Vegas, right? Like William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, and Riley Smith. These were guys that were in the NHL but weren't getting a top line opportunity. They got it and they showed us that they had a lot more talent than we thought. So it'd be fun to see. Unfortunately, we might, like, I don't know, it just seems like Seattle has the potential to just take a bunch of guys who we already know are good and we won't be able to unearth any gems. But yeah, that'll be fun. But okay, I guess that's all for our speculation.
Well, you didn't mention the big one.
I didn't. Who did I leave out?
Gabriel
I did
Landeskog.
say Landeskog. Brian, you have to listen to me when I'm talking.
Okay. Well, okay. When did you say him?
When I was talking last.
Okay.
Let's just go on.
Okay, just move on. Okay, well, let me just add one more thing.
Okay.
And just before we move on to the rest of the content and talk about all the trades that happened, who better to get for free and sign to a contract and used to be like a cornerstone piece of your franchise than Gabriel Landeskog? Like you might have thought Vladimir Tarasenko was the superstar that could fall into Seattle's lap. But then Gabriel Landeskog, guy who was a captain at such a young age, was a key part of this Colorado team that has grown and grown and grown. Of course, you can't take all the credit for it, but I think he deserves a fair amount for being there from the start and still continuing to be a key piece all the way through. That just seems like such a tempting guy. Like you can't. So how many other teams in the league would say, okay, I'm ready to press the reset button if I get to reset with Gabriel Landeskog? That just seems so good, too good to be true. So we'll see if it turns out as obviously as I think it should.
Well, I mean, all the teams do have a shot at Landeskog. I guess if Seattle takes him, then they get first crack. Yeah, but like, I don't know. Maybe someone could have sent him a carrier pigeon or something. Just be like, hey, we got something good for you, and the time is over. I know that that's not exactly allowed. Okay, so anyways, that's our speculation about the expansion draft. We'll have to do another show at some point breaking down Seattle. We've got a lot of shows scheduled, by the way. I've got 3 beat writer interviews coming out in this next week. As of now, it looks like we're going to be doing Edmonton, Boston, and Florida. So then Brian and I may have to also squeeze in a Seattle discussion. So yeah, there's a lot of Keeping Karlsson content coming to you, but we've got more coming to you right now on this show. One team that we didn't talk about their protected list, even though it's kind of interesting, is the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I wanted to bring them up now in the context of a trade that they made because they seem to be preparing for the post Zach Hyman era. Apparently Hyman and the Leafs are far away in their contract talks. So the Leafs have traded prospect Philip Hollander and a 7th round pick to the Penguins in exchange for Jared McCann, who is coming off like a huge year in Pittsburgh. He had 32 points in 43 games. It's a 61 point pace. And as listeners of the show know, or followers of the NHL, that doesn't even tell the whole story. Like this 61 point pace is over the whole season. Like McCann actually had a slow start to the year. It was like after Malkin got hurt that he really took off. If you cut out the first, say, 13 games of the season, McCann had 26 points in his final 30 games. That's a 71 point pace. So he was like, anyone who grabbed him out of free agency, as you likely were able to do early on in the season, he was like a fantasy, if not MVP, just like a really core piece of your fantasy team for a lot of the season. And now he's on Toronto, though he's exposed in this expansion draft now. So I guess we'll see. I guess Toronto didn't want to lose Alex Kerfoot, or at least now if they lose Kerfoot, then they get to keep McCann. So it'll probably be one of those guys. But if Jared McCann is on Toronto, I mean, this has got to be like a tasty potential fantasy sleeper, or maybe not sleeper, because people might be excited because we saw what Zach Hyman could do playing with Matthews and Marner. And I don't know, I would imagine, I guess if they lose Kerfoot, McCann is a center. Jesse Marshall, when I talked to him, he said that McCann's not that great at center, and it's better. Like it was really good when Pittsburgh got Jeff Carter, so McCann could play with him on the wing, or when he was in the top 6 on the wing. So I think if it turns out that McCann stays on Toronto, if he's on a top 6 line, like playing with either Tavares or Matthews, seems to me like this could be a potential 60 plus point guy who you might be able to get pretty deep in your fantasy draft. So I'm excited about McCann right now.
And I'm going to tell you to temper that excitement, because if you're thinking he's just going to slide into Zach Hyman's spot, he's in the opposite shot. Hyman shoots right, McCann shoots left. So even if he does play the wing, he's going to have to displace someone who is not so easily.
Okay, so can he play with Tavares and Nylander then on the other line?
Like sure, anything's possible.
These shots, who cares? Left wing, right wing. In fantasy, like halfway through the season, everyone has left wing and right wing eligibility. It seems like these players could play all
I'm
over.
not talking about fantasy though. I'm talking about, and well, if you hate this, you're gonna hate what I say about some of the defensemen we're gonna cover later in the show.
I think that's more real. I think the left D, right D thing, I think that's real. I just feel like we had this talk about like on remember about with the Rangers going into last season, everyone was like, oh, Lafreniere, he's like a left wing, and the Rangers are so deep on left wing, like so he's going to be like on the third line. And then like a few games in, he was getting a shot on the top line on the right side. So it's like I don't know if the teams cared that much. I think they're happy to try players, but whatever. Okay, continue.
Okay, so okay, well that would mean I'm looking at the handedness. I won't go too deep here. To try and figure out where McCann fits as a winger, but I honestly see him having much more use to the Leafs as a third line centerman. But whoever stays, he or Kerfoot, we don't know who's going to end up, I think is more likely to play third line center than first or second line left wing. But hey, I guess we'll just there's not a whole lot of reason to get too deep into speculating about where McCann's going to land, but we can talk about what he did last season, which was really good, right? He had that amazing finish to the year and really stepped up on the top power play. But I think his career trajectory is still being a middle six centerman who can do some damage if he gets opportunity to play in the top six and on the power play. But I think he's more of the type who quietly does good work. Like he had really great shot share numbers last season. He's reliable. Coaches trust him, and that's all good, but I don't think it's all going to add up to top end fantasy production. A huge reason for why he was so valuable last year is that McCann took full advantage of that power play one opportunity that he had because of Evgeny Malkin's injury, and he was actually used as a trigger man on that power play, took full advantage. He scored 7 times on 21 shots, which is a lot, but I'm actually not taking a ton away from him. Like showed some great finishing from dangerous areas with the man advantage. That's fantastic. But it's not a situation I see him in often. If he stays in Toronto, I guess Seattle will offer a little more possibility, but he's really going to need that opportunity. And I don't think he's a lock to get it anywhere that he goes. I think the best case for McCann is probably that he's a 50-55 type guy, 50-55 points, assuming that he does not. Yeah, even if he does find a route back to a top power play, I'm not sure he can really top out beyond that. And I think it's more likely, and I'm sorry because you're so excited about him, but I think he's more likely to be a guy who lands in his 40s. I honestly think of him as a version of Kerfoot who paces for 35-40 points, steady on that third line, sometimes comes up, can come up to play on the second, which he also did in Colorado as well when he was still there. So for these reasons, I'm not so pumped about McCann, but there's one reason that everyone keeps mentioning about why he's not a great acquisition. That's he's on his 4th NHL team. He's only 25 years old. I saw a tweet from someone who I unfortunately can't remember exactly who it was. And I looked really hard to find it before the show and I couldn't, but it was from someone who either worked in the Florida front office when they acquired Jared McCann or knew someone who worked there when they traded to get McCann from Vancouver. And they pointed out, yeah, this is his 4th NHL team, but context is important because Florida really liked him when they got him. And the only reason they traded him is because there was this whole shift in the approach the front office and player evaluation was taking in Florida. And it wasn't because he was any worse or any different than what the team that acquired him expected him to be, but priorities changed and he didn't fit the type of player that the front office wanted anymore. So they moved him to Pittsburgh, where he stayed for 3 years before the Penguins are now forced to move him to get something back in an expansion scenario, right? It was lose him for nothing or get something back for him. And when you're given those two options, you can't take it as a slight against Jared McCann that Pittsburgh's like, okay, well, we'll get something back for him rather than lose him for nothing. So I don't see the fact that Jared McCann's been on 4 different teams as being 3 strikes and now he's on his 4th. I see him still as a still young player. He's just 25 years old, extremely useful, has done well across many different situations. And to me, that's actually encouraging that he's going to be able to stick in the NHL for a long time as this middle six center or, as you hope, winger.
I mean, well, first of all, like Pittsburgh could have also like protected him. So it's not as if like it was like they had no choice. They could have just protected on him instead of some other guy. But anyways, yeah, point taken. And yeah, I like how you were apologizing to me, being like, sorry for you. Like I'm just telling you that I saw him have a 70-point pace for the majority of this past season. And now he's changing teams. So that to me is like someone that would be on my radar, but you're like not buying into it. 40-point guy, maybe 50. So I guess we'll have to see how it shakes out. But like he's definitely on my radar. And yeah, he's the kind of guy that obviously is going to depend on the deployment. And he's someone during training camp I'm going to be watching very closely, whether he's on Seattle or Toronto. Because I think if he goes to Seattle, that's another one of these, Jonathan Marchessault types.
Yeah.
Where like maybe he is a big star. Like Brian, we just saw him get points almost every game. It wasn't all on the power play.
So I really, really liked McCann last year, even though I didn't expect to at the start of his run. And I still want to like him. I just don't know when that opportunity is going to come. The upside when I said he's still young, just 25 years old, extremely useful. All of that means, okay, he can earn a coach's trust, and maybe we haven't seen his ceiling yet. So I'm not writing off the possibility that he can be in a 60, 70 point range if he does find himself in a situation where he's being counted on for offense, because like I said, he was the trigger man on the Penguins' top power play, which is a pretty freaking big deal. But I'm just not that confident he's going to get that opportunity, especially in Toronto. So we'll see if he moves to Seattle, and then we'll reconsider.
Okay, so that is fair enough. The reason also I just look at Toronto, and we'll move on and we'll see, he might leave. So, but like Toronto's top six, you've got the big four. And then after that, like, I don't know who's even there at this point. Like, I know at some point
you've got
Robertson. Yeah, Mikheyev, like Robertson will come up at some point. Like, yeah. I don't know. It's not as if there's a lot of people clamoring for that job. Well, I'm sure there's people clamoring, but like, there's not a lot of obvious options. So that's why I feel like Jared McCann, who just had so much success playing on the wing in Pittsburgh, why not? But okay, they'll obviously need a third line center. Actually, speaking of teams who need a third line center, Brian, so the Vancouver Canucks, it's not like a super fantasy relevant trade, I guess, but Jason Dickinson got traded to the Canucks for a pick. And I just felt that was interesting to me because when I talked to Murat Atesh about the Canucks, we were talking about how JT Miller played so well at center when Pettersson was injured.
I think you mean Harman Dayal.
Oh, no. Okay, let me go again.
You could just start from because when I talked, I think it'll be good there.
Because when I talked to Harman Dayal about the Canucks, he was saying how like JT Miller played so well at center when Elias Pettersson was injured. And if the Canucks like didn't have a third line center in place, maybe they move Miller to the third line if they're able to get some other winger. So I don't know. I thought it was interesting that the Canucks trade for Jason Dickinson, especially for me as someone who just recently traded for JT Miller in my Dynasty League. So I'm happy to see now that it's nothing to be concerned about. The Canucks got their 3C and now they can keep their top six how it should be with Miller, hopefully playing with Besser and Pettersson. So I wanted to throw that out there since we were talking about these third line centers.
Sure. I think that's exactly. Jason Dickinson seems more like a career third line center with less upside than Jared McCann. So how about that? Relatively looks good there. Come on, though. There was no way that JT Miller was ever actually going to play third line center.
Harman wrote a whole article on The Athletic about it.
Yeah, I know, but it just seemed like, I mean, we can't count on the Canucks management to necessarily do anything to avoid something like so ridiculous happening. But I don't know. I'm not surprised that they headed that off before it actually had to happen.
Yeah, well, now I'm kind of thinking, hey, if Miller is so good at playing center, then why don't you throw him at center sometimes, get Pettersson on the wing, all of a sudden get all those sweet JT Miller faceoff wins in my multi-category league with left wing eligibility. I'll take it. By the way, okay, so on the Pens, so yeah, they lose McCann. They got Philip Hollander, which is the guy they already had. They traded him to Toronto in the Kasperi-Kapanen deal, so now he comes back. So I don't know. We'll see. Like, we're not prospect experts. He had 24 points in 51 games in the SHL this past season. He's a 21-year-old now, so maybe he finally gets a shot to crack the Penguins. And I don't know, maybe they have a spot in the top six, maybe not. We'll see. Jason Zucker is exposed. Going into last year, we thought we finally knew who the Penguins top six would be for like the first time ever. Like, it was going to be Crosby with Gensel and Rust, and then Malkin with Zucker and Kapanen. Of course, Malkin's like injured now, so who even knows what's gonna happen in Pittsburgh. But like, if McCann, with McCann gone, it seems like there's potentially a spot for someone. Potentially, I don't know. It depends if Zucker goes or not. So I don't know. Any fancy relevance on Pittsburgh on your end?
I don't think there's a ton. I mean, I guess it's good for Jeff Carter, and I guess that it potentially means that maybe Kasperi-Kapanen has a shot at seeing top power play, because we know that Evgeny Malkin is likely to miss training camp, right? And he might not even be back for the start of the season. So that just means, Carter could start on the second line. How much that's worth when the second line doesn't have Evgeny Malkin on it remains to be seen, but there might be a hole on that top power play that either Jeff Carter or Kasperi Kapanen are going to get a chance to fill.
Okay.
Did you disagree with that?
No. Sorry, I was just browsing around. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, Jeff Carter is protected. I didn't expect that, but I guess
that's why McCann was traded, because they couldn't protect them both. So they chose to protect Carter.
Let me see here. So who did they protect? Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, Rust, Kapanen, Carter, Teddy Bluger. Well, why'd they protect? I know there's like also all these complicated rules about they needed to also protect some players who hadn't played a certain number of games or had. I don't know. I feel like I'd rather have like McCann over Teddy Bluger. But anyway, okay, whatever. Let's move on. Actually, Brian, we've got a lot to get to, including a bunch of trades that Nashville was involved in. We'll get to that in just a sec. You're listening to Keep It Karlsson. Do you want to jump in after the ad break?
Yeah, sure. Elon, I took that ad break to take a peek at.
Well, maybe at least give it like an "and we're back."
Okay. And now that we're back, Elon, I efficiently used the time for that ad break to look a little bit more into the Bluger keeper situation. I think that's just because it looks like they saw Jared McCann as a winger, ironically enough, after the conversation we just had, and Bluger is a center, and they prioritize needing a center instead of a winger.
There you go. Okay, so like I said, let's go to the Predators. They've blown things up a bit, a couple big deals. So first of all, way back on July 1st, they sent Victor Arvidsson in his remaining 3 years at $4.25 million AAV to the Los Angeles Kings for a couple of picks. Then Nashville was involved in a 3-way deal on Saturday. They sent Ryan Ellis to Philly and eventually got back Cody Glass from Vegas and Philippe Myers from Philly. So there was a Glass for Nolan Patrick deal, which we'll talk about in a sec, but obviously Nashville doesn't care about that at this point. So that's two significant pieces gone from the Predators, and Arvidsson and Ellis, and all they've gotten back are a couple picks, Adept D and Philippe Myers, and a so far stagnating prospect in Cody Glass, who only had 10 points in 27 games last year. So my initial take here is that barring some big moves in UFA, and we're saying that they're probably going to lose Calle Yarncroc. So yeah, barring some big moves in UFA, seems like Nashville's going to have to go into a bit of a rebuild. And to me, like my initial take is like, I feel like this kind of has got to hurt the remaining fantasy relevant. It's got to hurt the fantasy value of some of the like remaining stars on the team, like Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, or maybe guys I take a little bit later now, just because who are these guys going to play with to get points?
Exactly. And who is going to help UC Saros stop shots? Right? Nashville has announced that they're going into what they're calling a competitive rebuild. And I don't know how competitive it's going to be. We did sort of talk about this a lot over the last season, whenever we were talking about how great UC Saros was and what his value is going to be next season. I was usually saying, well, but look out, because we don't know exactly whether Nashville is headed in the right direction as a team. But whenever I said that, I didn't in my mind think that they would deal away Victor Arvidsson and Ryan Ellis and expose Duchesne and Johansson. Like I didn't know it was going to be like this, but you have to figure this is all going to hurt. I think it's going to hurt UC Saros the most, right? The Nashville decor is suddenly very thin. You've got Roman Josi, Matisse Ekholm, and then a bunch of guys. And we should mention, only to be fair, that UC Saros was incredible while Ryan Ellis was out with his shoulder injury last season. He was a .959 over 11 appearances, and the Preds actually went 8-2-0, and Saros actually went 8-2-0, posting 2 shutouts and only gave up 14 goals in his 11 appearances without Ellis in the lineup. That's when he started to just go wild and get everyone's attention and get plucked out of every free agency and waiver wire in everyone's fantasy leagues. But I'm not going to say that correlation equals causation there, and that he only played well because Ryan Ellis was out. I think in the big picture, this is bad news for UC Saros. And like you said, Elon, also bad for some of those Nashville forwards. Like look at Philip Forsberg. He finally took the step forward this year, thanks to the extra deployment that he was finally given after we begged for it for years. And now that they've gave him a little more rope, the team is now saying, we're actually all going to take a step back. Now, Forsberg has spent the last 2 years playing largely with Ryan Johansson and Victor Arvidsson. So Johansson is exposed. Arvidsson is gone. I think you could take this as a positive and say, well, Forsberg, never really broke through with those guys, but I would still wager that was an ice time and power play problem rather than a line problem. And I think that would be really working too hard to be optimistic about this. I think it's pretty negative that he has lost 1/3 or one of his other two main line mates for the last 3 years. And the other one is obviously not favored by the organization either. So
but to be fair, Johansson, there's no chance he's going anywhere. He's coming back.
For sure. It's like a free exposure. And I guess it's also no secret that Nashville would be happy to get away from that contract. So you're right. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into him being exposed, but the way that Nashville's going into this competitive rebuild, I wonder if they're going to start trying to give some other guys some reps, but I don't know who those guys would be.
Yeah, so definitely I concur about Filip Forsberg. We'll see who we can play with. Obviously, they've got some guys coming up. Eli Tolvanen, we were so excited about last year. They've got this prospect that I see people talking about all the time, Philip Tomasino. So maybe he comes in and could do something. But yeah, right now it's not. But by the way, Brian, tell me if I'm wrong. This is just a gut feeling. I'm not worried about UC Saros. Like this guy, like also it's like fine. I think that Ryan Ellis is like a great defenseman, but it's not as if he's like the most like defensive defenseman. Like he's great at getting like a bunch of points. But like whatever. Nashville will have Roman Josi and Ekholm, and now they have Philip Myers, Dante Fabro is this up and coming guy. Like they'll fill out their D. And if anything, like UC Saros now becomes a guy who's potentially going to be a very high volume goalie because it was just announced that Pekka Rinne is retiring. So we'll see if like Connor Ingram becomes the backup or if they sign someone else. But I mean, UC Saros is the kind of guy to me, like he's the reason why I'm not reaching for a goalie in fantasy after, Vasilevsky, right? Because I feel like Saros might fall, to like 8th or 9th. I guess we'll have to see like when fantasy rankings start coming out. It's really hard. Like I'd have Saros probably in my second tier right now going into next year after Vasilevsky, maybe Hellebuck, so maybe third tier. You start throwing in a guy like Saros along with a Grubauer, and we have to look at the situations after all the free agency plays out.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have a lot of faith that Saros is going to hold up and do his best work when he's busy. And also without having a backup, like he's going to get run. And I know that worked for him last year in a shortened season. I don't know how it's going to work for him over an 82 game season.
Yeah,
and
got to imagine they bring someone in as a backup.
I appreciate the upside that's there as a guy who's proven himself that he can be really good, who's going to see a lot of work, who's going to be a number one goalie. It's not easy to find. It's almost like not exactly like John Gibson last year as a very good goalie on a bad team, because John Gibson had a bad year already and UC Saros is coming off a very good year. So, but like, I think there might be a bit of an analogy there in the kind of value you can like risk trying to see, but you seem much more optimistic that UC Saros is going to perform next year than I think you would have about John Gibson performing last year.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm saying is that it's like trading Ryan Ellis isn't making me all of a sudden like worried about UC Saros. But yeah, if they don't have a backup at all and they have to play him like all the time, like Carter Hart last year or like John Gibson, like you say, yeah, maybe that could be concerning. But there's a long offseason still. I guess one name that could potentially center Filip Forsberg if they don't want to play him with Johansson anymore is Cody Glass, who they've just gotten back in this trade. We thought Glass could be a potential sleeper last year. Remember, like when Paul Stastny went to Winnipeg, it looked like, oh, maybe Cody Glass is going to be in the top 6 in Vegas. And like right away, Chandler Stevenson took the line 1 center job, leaving Glass to languish in the bottom 6 once again. He's 22 years old now. He's a former 6th overall pick in 2017. Are you excited for this guy? Like, is he someone now on your radar that he comes to Nashville, or is he sort of just I don't know, wait and see? I'm not too excited. Like Eli Tolvanen, by the way, was taken in that same draft in 2017, 30th overall. Like I said, Glass went 6th. If you got to pick one Nashville guy for your dynasty team or a one-year league for next year, would you take the 6th overall pick or the 30th overall pick from 2017?
Well, I'm going to use their names and say that I would take Eli Tolvanen, the 30th overall pick from 2017, because of his likelihood of getting on the top power play. I did just say that the Predators might try and give younger guys some more opportunity and maybe take some away from Ryan Johansson. But even if Cody Glass got it, I'm not sure he'd take advantage of it at this point. I don't see much reason to be excited for him. The third line center role in Vegas last year was his to lose, and he lost it to Nicholas Roy, and not for a lack of opportunity. He had plenty of chances to make things work there, but nothing seemed to look good for Vegas while Glass was on the ice in that role. So we'll see if a fresh start helps for Cody Glass in Nashville, but I'm not sitting here thinking that a change of scenery was all he needed, which is why I'm not getting interested in Cody Glass. I'm also not getting interested in him because the team he's on, Nashville as a whole, we just talked about how Philip Forsberg value goes down. Think of the ceiling on a guy like Glass that we're anticipating going into next year. And that's why I would prefer Tolvanen, because at least I've seen that he can at least provide some niche value as a power play producer. And I expect to see that happen next year. Glass, we haven't even seen that much.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely am staying clear of Glass until he gives us a reason to be interested. And yeah, I did mention, but I'll just complete this conversation. Philip Tomasino is a centerman. Also, he's the 2019 24th overall pick, and he had 32 points in 29 games with the Chicago Wolves of the AHL last season, which is pretty impressive for like a 18 or 19-year-old playing professional hockey. So he's definitely someone to watch. And if you're in a dynasty league, I know that in my dynasty leagues, there's been lots of talk about how people are very excited about Mr. Tomasino. Seems like there could be a top line center position available in Nashville because Duchesne and Johansson, they're like just trying to dump those contracts as fast as they can. Okay, so let's go to LA now. Talk about this Victor Arvidsson guy who's now getting a fresh start, try to regain whatever swagger he lost. He was like a keeping Karlsson favorite, right? He had 3 straight 60+ point seasons with the Preds. Since then, he's pretty much disappeared in his last couple of years, at least fantasy wise, like 40 and 41 point paces in 2019-20, 2020-21. Unfortunately, I'll throw it out there. Like if recent history is any indication, players generally need to leave LA to become valuable fantasy assets, not the other way around. Like we've seen like Tyler Toffoli, Alec Martinez, like even Tanner Pearson go from being kind of fantasy nobodies to players that are worth, having a look at, or like Toffoli and Martinez even like becoming like really valuable fantasy pieces. It's been a long time since I could recall a player like going to LA, like LA acquiring a player and their fantasy value going up. Brian, I even actually spent some time when I was preparing for the show, like trying to think of a name, and I couldn't think of a name. Like Wayne Gretzky, his value didn't go up. He was great on the Oilers already. Like, do you have a name? Do you have anyone that's gone to LA and become more valuable, like we're hoping Victor Arvidsson can be?
You'd have to look a long way back, but that's because recent history with LA going into their cup winning days, the formula was to just shut it down, and then even after that, the formula stayed shut it down. And now there's some change afoot. So I don't know if we can really judge what it means to go to LA today relative to what it's meant for the last 10 years. Because I feel like you lumped them in at the start of the show you called them a bad team with Anaheim and Buffalo.
Well, for next year, I think LA has a great future once all of their young prospects are good. You think next year LA is a strong competitor?
Look, I think this next year could still be bad, but I think it could still be the start of like a new beginning in Los Angeles. So I'm not about to say that whoever goes to LA is going to feel the same effect. And honestly, who else did LA even acquire over the last 10 years? Like, name me a guy who went to LA. Yeah, exactly. So like we don't even have a baseline to measure.
Andreas Athanasiou, he went to LA.
Yeah, he also went to Edmonton. And
okay, so by the way, Jeremy is saying in the chat here, Jeff Carter is his pick. So I don't know if I buy that. So Jeff Carter had he had an 84 point season with Philly in his second year in the league, then 61 points, then 66. Then I guess he had a down year in Columbus when he got traded to LA. But then after that on LA, he was closer to like 52 point pace, 56, 61. So I don't know. I think he was better on Philly than he was on LA. So it doesn't count.
His prime career years were anyway. I don't think it's fair to say because you're getting traded to LA.
Question for the listeners. Give me one name. A player who was not useful, then went to LA and then was like much better.
My question to the listeners is name one player who went to LA, period.
Okay. All right. So anyway, Victor Arvidsson, Brian, regardless of this silly thing, do you think he could break the trend and like get back on track to the guy he was before? I'd imagine a lot will depend on like, deployment. Like obviously it would be nice if he could be centered by Kopitar. It would be nice if he can play on the top power play, which you'd think they'd give him a shot at. So I don't know. What's your current projection? If you had to do a projection right now, are we talking like back to the 60s, stick in the 40s? Or are you going to just like go right in the middle? I'll bet you're going to go in the middle and say 50s.
So first off, it's hard to say, like you're trying to project where he's going to sit in the depth chart, and also going with this like new LA that I'm trying to tout. It's very possible that LA makes some moves. Like they have cap space. We talked about this, or at least you and I don't remember if it was on a show or just you and I chatting, but at the start of the offseason, LA raised eyebrows as a team. They could really do something. And if they want to try to start competing with their young core now, they have the space. to try and make a splash or two to do it. So we'll see what the roster looks like. If it stays exactly the same, yeah, it would be really nice for Arvidsson to land with Kopitar on the top line. The second line center, probably Gabe Vilardi. I guess Quinton Byfield might have a shot at taking on that role for some of the season. But let's just talk about Victor Arvidsson in a vacuum by looking at his most recent season, where Arvidsson had just a 5% shooting percentage and a 55% IPP at 5-on-5, which were more or less, well, career low IPP, almost career low shooting percentage. Then on the power play, Arvidsson only shot 9%. That was a career low. And his teammates only shot 9%, which was also a career low. So a lot of poor variance for Victor Arvidsson last season, but that doesn't excuse all of it. He didn't quite look the way he did in his peak as a 65, 70 point player in the other pieces that aren't affected by variance that he has a little more control of, like Arvidsson was shooting less and from less dangerous areas. But I think he deserved more than he ended up getting and showed some improvement over that just disastrous 2019-20 season he had, which, by the way, I don't know if you read, but he did an article, an interview for Adam Vingan of The Athletic on his way out of Nashville. And he was asked about a cross-check from Robert Bertuzzo that came about 5-6 weeks into that 2019-20 season. That was like his first really awful season after a few good ones. And he shared, he played only 57 games. He shared after that cross-check, that single cross-check, he blew 2 MCLs. And he came back 5 weeks later, and it sounds like maybe he rushed to be part of the outdoor game. He said it was too early to come back, and he never felt right. So now, instead of seeing only 2 years of huge disappointments from Arvidsson, we say, okay, well, 2 bad seasons. The first one was probably an injury, and the second one had poor variance and kind of curious deployment too. And in LA, like you said, Elon, there may be room on the top power play for him. Hopefully he's healthy. Keep in mind, even in Arvidsson's great seasons, going back to that power play point, he was only somewhere between 7 and 13 power play points total on the year. So I have a lot of reason to still want to give Arvidsson the benefit of the doubt that he can return to being fantasy relevant and be worth drafting this year. I'm not buying in wholesale, but I really like the opportunity for him to start fresh, to start healthy, get some of that variance sorted out, and hopefully have a new beginning in LA, where you said I'm going to be in the middle, like in the 50-55 point range. Yeah, I think that's most likely. That's where most of the guys we talk about land. But if you want me to pick over or under, I am going to stick my neck out a bit here and say over.
All right. Yeah, you've always been a fan of Arvidsson, and I like it. It'll be really fun to see him get this fresh start, see what we can do. Like we've said about Nashville, it's not exactly a place where players have been thriving lately. So maybe this fresh start will be good for him. Man, I'm looking through a list of acquisitions by the LA Kings over the years. You're right. There's nobody. Like everyone, they got Gaborik, who was brought up in the chat here by Fantasy Tidbits, that they got him in 2014. But that was like, he was much better on the Rangers and on Columbus than he was on LA. He kind of like went down. He was on LA. They got Lucic. I didn't even remember that they traded for Lucic, but okay. I don't know. Recently,
they were able to get rid of him too.
Maybe Lias Anderson will turn out to be a good get for LA at some point, but we'll have to wait and see. Man, okay, well, here it is. The Kings are finally back and ready to try to get players and improve their team, and we'll see if Victor Arvidsson is the first in a long line of successful acquisitions that really come out of their shell once they're on the Kings. Okay, so we're still looking at this big 3-way trade between Nashville, LA, and Philly. So let's look at Philly, who got Ryan Ellis. So he's coming to the picture. Brian, I guess if you were saying that you're worried about UC Saros losing Ryan Ellis, does that mean that you're excited for Carter Hart gaining Ryan Ellis? Like, I guess in general, you probably know more about this than me. Like this Philippe Myers character who Philly traded, like obviously Ryan Ellis is the guy who's fantasy relevant, the player who we know in terms of like defensive abilities. Is it like Ellis is also a big improvement over Myers on the defensive end in a way that like it's going to help the goalie be better?
I think so. I mean, the Flyers definitely had high hopes for Myers. He's this big defenseman who they thought could maybe step in and be at least a top 4 guy reliably last year and eventually top pair. And he didn't. I mean, the whole defense did look like kind of disorganized chaos last year. And maybe that was because of Carter Hart, like chicken egg. It was really hard to say exactly where things went south for Philly last year. But the bottom line is that Myers didn't show up as soon as they hoped for him to, and now they go and get Ryan Ellis, who is one of the top right-handed defenseman in the entire league. So how can you not like that? And finally, like the Flyers have been looking for a top pair righty to play with Provorov for a long time. They've had Matt Niskanen, but he's gone to UFA. And like, was he really?
No, Niskanen retired, by the way.
Oh, right. Okay.
You go from they had Matt Niskanen.
Okay. They had Matt Niskanen, who's now retired, so he's not coming back. The only other NHL experienced right-handed defenseman under contract in Philly right now is Justin Braun. So acquiring Ryan Ellis was kind of a really big deal for the Flyers. And let's not forget, he can also quarterback the power play if called upon. He's got a great shot and isn't afraid to use it. And wouldn't it be nice to see him get that opportunity? I guess it'll like that. I don't know, right? I think we're going to have to wait even till the first week or two of the season to really find out. But the upside is there. Of course, the downside for Ryan Ellis is that he has this injury history, especially last year's injury where he missed, I think it was 20 games with his shoulder. That was concerning. And it looks like it might have actually impacted his offensive and defensive numbers once he was back. And in a cap league, you're looking at the 6.25 million and saying, okay, he's got that till he's 36 years old. I think that's still, if you can get a top 4 defenseman for that price, I think that's pretty good. And I think he can offer that for another 3 or 4 years. And maybe he kind of Ryan Suiters his way to being a 36-year-old who might not be like the hugest impact defenseman, but he can eat a lot of minutes and be pretty steady in those minutes. So for Ryan Ellis, I know you asked me about what this means for Carter Hart, but talking about Ryan Ellis first, I don't think this changes. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It doesn't change where I have him in my draft list next year, though I'm definitely curious that maybe he has a higher ceiling now if he does get that top power play role. And then to go back and answer your question, I of course like what this all implies. I like what this could mean for Carter Hart and all of Philly, right? Like Ryan Ellis is good at getting the puck and making a pass and starting a play. This is good for everybody, for the guys behind him like Carter Hart and the guys in front of him like the forward. So I'm really excited by this move for Philly after what was such a disappointing year.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you. Ellis is going to have a shot at the power play, like you said. And Carter Hart, when we talked to Charlie O'Connor about Philly, like it was like Hart, you don't know, almost like you don't want to read too much into this like breakdown. This past year, like, was a weird season already. He had to play like so much. Like he really could have used like a week off if Philly just couldn't give it to him because Brian Elliott wasn't doing any better. So I was already like expecting Carter Hart, who's only 22 years old and still so young. So I was already expecting him to, like have a bounce back. And now it's nice that he has like this good extra defenseman on the team. Ellis is interesting because if you look at, like, I don't even know what to project him. I wouldn't have known what to project for him if he stayed in Nashville. These are his point paces over the last 5 seasons: 44, 60, 41, 64, 42. Like there's no middle ground. It's like Arvidsson, except alternating. He's either in the 40s, low 40s, or he's in the 60s. So now if the pattern continues, he's about to have a big 60 plus point pace season in Philly. And I think the opportunity is there. Like we've seen that Provorov isn't someone that Philly loves on the top power play. Shane Gostisbehere, when he wasn't benched and he got a shot on the top power play, was doing well there. So I guess it's going to probably depend a lot on if Gostisbehere gets taken by Seattle or if Philly can trade him. But yeah, I definitely don't see why they wouldn't at least give Ryan Ellis a shot. And so I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't really know what to project for him. I'd probably land around 45 just to be safe, because also with the injury, it's almost like you want to bump him down anyways in your draft list just because of the injury risk. So if he if people, people always get excited about someone going to a new situation, which we've chronicled on the show, often doesn't work out as well as you hope, right? Like we've seen defensemen go to new teams where we assumed for sure they're going to take over on the top power play. Like off the top of my head, there was Piki Subban when he went to New Jersey. There was like Trouba when he went to the Rangers. I don't know, Justin Falk when he went to St. Louis. Like, I don't know, like it's happened and it doesn't always go the way we expect. So if people are like super excited about Ryan Ellis, and I'll let someone else draft him, but if he's falling and then like I could get like a, high 40s point defenseman, he's definitely someone I'm looking at around there.
He always seems to be a guy who falls to a moment where you're ready to take him, right? No one ever seems to jump for Ryan Ellis, which is fair, especially given his up and down history. So yeah, I don't see him. I think your caveat was interesting. That just because he's on a new team doesn't mean we should get any more excited about him. And maybe it's actually a flag that we shouldn't expect things to go perfectly smoothly, because maybe it won't be a fit, or maybe it takes time to figure out the fit. Last year, I was just looking up his ADP in the Cupful. He was drafted on average 97th overall.
Yeah, and he was a disappointment because he was coming off a 64-point pace season, and then last year he was back in the 40s. So anyone who drafted him is definitely going to be listening to this podcast, being like, "Yeah, I'm definitely not making that mistake again." And so we'll see. But anyways, regardless, it's still like a good move for Philly. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, in terms of fantasy value, I'm not rushing to grab Ryan Ellis. Okay, let's complete. So I actually included LA in the three-way trade. That LA and Nashville trade was already like a while ago. The final participant in the three-way trade was Vegas. So right, they traded They traded Cody Glass, and they got Nolan Patrick. So we've already talked about Glass and Tolvanen, who were picked 6th and 30th in the 2017 draft. So let's go all the way up to number 2. Nolan Patrick was taken 2nd, right before the NHL's newest multimillionaire, Miro Heiskanen, who went 3rd. By the way, Heiskanen just signed an 8-year, $8.45 million per year deal on Saturday. So far, definitely Heiskanen has had a better career than Nolan Patrick. To be honest, I'm going to say it, like, this clearly was a whiff of a pick for Philly. They've already traded Patrick away, so clear, and haven't gotten like such an amazing return. Yeah, they got Ryan Ellis, but I don't know if it was that sending Nolan Patrick was the big thing that got them Ellis. So obviously they would like to do it again, but who knows? Maybe Nolan Patrick is still young. Now he's going to Vegas. Cody Glass couldn't crack, you said, even the top 9. Do you have any hope or expectations that Patrick will be able to do it? Like, if you had to pick like Patrick versus Cody Glass for next year, who's by the way, Patrick stunk last year. Let's just say, like, I brought up that Cody Glass didn't have the best year. Patrick had 9 points in 52 games. So it was nice that he played the whole year, because, the previous year he missed the entire season with those migraines and whatever was going on. So it was nice to see him play almost the whole season, but 9 points in 52 games is nothing. Like, there's like depth defensemen who get more points than that on most teams.
For sure. It was a really bad season. And I only hope that it was because Nolan Patrick was just kicking off rust and also getting comfortable again, right? When your head, like, he's having this migraine problems that causes him to miss an entire season. Hockey is a game where your head gets hit a lot, and I would be really scared if I were playing. And I don't know if that's something that will continue, or if he eventually was able to play the way that he had played before. I'm not convinced he has. I'm not convinced he's shown his true potential yet. You called him a whiff of a pick, and I get, because of like the deal and the return. I understand.
Well, also because next one, Heiskanen, then Cale Makar, then Elias Pettersson.
Well, we've talked about a lot of that 2017 draft tonight, right? Because that was also the Tolvanen, or we talked about Glass versus Tolvanen.
Well, he sure also was a whiff, right?
He sure went first. And then Velarde, we also mentioned, he went 11th. Then Nichas and Suzuki, 12 and 13. Then Josh Norris, Philip Hedl, Kyler Yamamoto, and Robert Thomas were all taken in the first round in 2017. And all of those names have made at least or more of a name for themselves. And Nolan Patrick has been able to so far. I'm really hoping that this is a nice, fresh start. This seems, unlike Cody Glass, I don't think Cody Glass needed a change of scenery. I think he needed to just play better. I'm hoping, Nolan Patrick needs to play better, but I have more hope that a change of scenery is going to benefit him than I do for Cody Glass. So I want Nolan Patrick to succeed. And I think the third line in Vegas is a pretty decent assignment to get to try and make that happen. So I wish Nolan Patrick all the best. I will not be drafting him for the same reason that I wouldn't even draft Alex Tuch, right? Who we know is a proven producer on that third line, but I am hoping that he makes himself streamable by having a really nice year in Vegas.
Yeah, I feel like when the podcaster is like continually reiterating that they really want the player to do well, like, you read between the lines, means that don't pick this guy. They're probably not going to do well. You just hope, like, because it would be nice. And also, clearly now we know that you don't care about if Cody Glass does well. You care so much more about Nolan Patrick. What did Cody Glass do to you?
I get you're right. I feel bad now. I hope the truth is I want everyone to succeed. Well, almost everyone. There's some guys who I'd rather not. But I hope Cody Glass does well. I hope Nolan Patrick does well. I just feel like I've followed Nolan Patrick a lot since he was drafted, and it just hasn't been a smooth ride. So I'm really hoping that things get smooth. Cody Glass has a little more adversity to face before I'm like, you can do it, Cody.
Yeah, that's fair. He already has an advantage in life because his name is Cody, which is always the name of someone cool. Okay, so next, I wanted to talk to you about Heiskanen. I brought him up. But what do you think about this contract? So 8.45 million per year, like I said, for 8 years. That makes him the 6th highest paid defenseman in the league. That might change soon, though. Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, and Rasmus Dahlin are all RFAs, and they're all probably going to see that Heiskanen contract and be like, I think I'm at least as good as Miro Heiskanen, if not better. So I think we're going to have a lot of expensive D contracts coming out soon. Yeah, Heiskanen's cap hit now is more than fantasy studs like John Carlson, Victor Hedman. He's a touch behind Roman Yosie's 9 million. So, I mean, I'm definitely not going to come on the show and say Heiskanen isn't good. Like, Heiskanen's awesome. But in fantasy, if you're in a dynasty like cap league, 8.45 million for a guy who had 27 points in 55 games last year, which is like a 40-ish point pace. I don't know. If I had him, I'd be a little concerned. Like, obviously there's still upside for more, and one day Klingberg won't be there and Heiskanen will get more power play time, but he did have 58% of the team's power play time this past year. So it's not as if he didn't get an opportunity to play with the man advantage. He already played 25 minutes a game on average last year also. So it's not as if we have, expected like increased role. He was already playing all the freaking time, almost half the game. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe he could grow into a 50-point guy, but I don't know if that's worth it depending on your league format. So anyway, good for Heiskanen, probably good for Dallas because I know he does a lot of great stuff, but Victor actually has Heiskanen in the Dynasty League I'm in, and I wouldn't trade for Heiskanen, I don't think.
It's pretty bad for cap or dynasty league managers who have Heiskanen. This feels a lot like, actually, Elon, you just had Brendan Gallagher, who like his new contract kicked in, and you're like, actually, I don't think his production makes that dollar tag worthwhile. And I feel like the same is true for Heiskanen now with this new deal, especially for the next year where he's still potentially sharing power play duties with John Klingberg. And then Klingberg becomes an unrestricted free agent. So we're not sure what happens beyond that. But yeah, Heiskanen is not terribly attractive at this point in a cap or dynasty. Honestly, even in a 1 year, he still doesn't strike me as someone with a huge upside or ceiling to produce. And of course, I have my anti-Stars bias because of the way they tend to play with so few goals. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of having the Heiskanen in any context, but this contract especially hurts anyone who has him in a league that sort of thing matters.
They have Jason Robertson, Brian. They're going to score a freaking goal. I'm so excited to see what you're going to project.
Jason Robertson is going to score 40 goals and no one else.
Okay, so Joe Pavelski famously had 51 points in 56 games for a 75-point pace. No, I just want to let me finish my question.
It's just I feel like we've had this back.
No, I just have a question for you, a new question.
All right.
Pavelski, I'm just giving the context.
I'll only answer it if it's new.
Okay, Pavelski had a 75-point pace last year. The whole way through, you said he's going to slow down at some point, and I guess he did a little, but like he still was getting points almost every game. So what are you going to project Pavelski for next year when we have to put pen to paper? We're going to go for, he had 38 pace the year before in his first year in Dallas, then jumped up to 75, which is actually his highest point pace of his career, believe it or not. Oh no, he had 78 points in 82 games in 2015-16 for the Sharks. But okay, so where do you see yourself landing for Pavelski? Are we going down to like 50? I feel like you're going to go to 50.
Well, it's tricky because there's also the fact that Tyler Seguin wasn't in the picture, and now he will be, which is likely going to take some opportunity away from Pavelski. Also, Robertson, like Pavelski was the guy for the first bit of the season until Robertson kind of emerged. It didn't take long for Robertson to emerge, but still Pavelski had some extra play because of that. So Elon, I don't know if I'm going to go all the way down to 50. I could see a world where he gets 60, but without having done any of my usual research or prep to answer this question. I mean, you've called me boring. You said it's the boring answer is 50, 55 points, or you said that could be, I think that's it. I don't want to be boring.
Fair.
If you ask me over under 55, I'll take the over, but there's also a lot of downside possible just because of everyone around him. You've got Hintz stepping up. You've got Seguin back. You've got Robertson stepping up too. And I just haven't decided if that helps Pavelski or hurts him.
Yeah, and he's 37 years old, so he's going to have to decline at some point. It's pretty wild to have such a
okay, I'm taking the under.
Take the under. Okay, so Pavelski versus Arvidsson. I'm just throwing stuff out to you that you didn't prepare for. Who are you taking first?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I think I will take Arvidsson on the presumption that he's on the top power play. If not, I'll switch to Pavelski.
Okay, I'll just take Pavelski over Arvidsson. You're higher on Arvidsson than me. I like him. I'm like Arvidsson, like you are to Nolan Patrick. Like, I hope he does well. That'll be nice, but I don't know if I'm gonna bank on it after 2 disappointing seasons. But okay, so speaking of free agent D-men, like Heiskanen no longer is one, unlike some of those other guys I mentioned. But there are a bunch of UFA free agent D-men. Some of them we knew, like Hamilton, Martinez, Barry, Edler, Adam Larson. They're all going to be unrestricted free agents this summer. But we also have a couple new names to add to the list, and Ryan Suter and Keith Yandel, who are both bought out by their respective teams, the Wild and the Panthers. And of course, Minnesota also bought out Zach Parise on the same day as Suter, 9 years after they signed both of them to their 13-year deals, which is kind of just crazy that they signed 13-year contracts. What a world we used to live in. Now this like Heiskanen 8-year contract is the longest you can do, and it almost feels like too long. But anyway, we'll dig into these guys more when they actually sign with their new teams. There's no point doing a deep dive on Ryan Suter and Zach Parise and their fantasy value since we don't even know where they're going. But any general, and same with Keith Yandel, like, do you see any general fantasy impact you want to discuss with respect to the Wild and the Panthers losing these longtime core members of their teams?
Not really. I guess part of, yeah. Not really. No, I think it's going to be good, if anything, for Parise, but with a big emphasis on the if anything. I think he probably still has something left to give.
Oh, wait, sorry. That wasn't what I asked. Sorry. I asked like...
You asked Minnesota and Florida.
I said, is there a fantasy impact on Minnesota and Florida?
Okay. I don't think so. I think Minnesota, like Suter wasn't really, he got occasional top power play time, and that was great for him. But I think healthy Dumba, they have Spurgeon. I think they're good between those two guys for power play time, and I don't think their fortunes are going to change substantially. Parise, Minnesota. The forward core in Minnesota isn't gonna be affected at all by Parise leaving, because he's getting like third line minutes and very like pretty much no power play deployment by the time the season was done. And same thing in Florida. Keith Yandel was definitely not in the picture for a lot of it. I think this will obviously help Aaron Ekblad, who didn't need the help. But now there's no sort of like, well, we're dressing Keith Yandel, so maybe we should just use him on the power play and take someone else's spot away. It wasn't always Ekblad who lost his spot because of it. But I think all three of these guys, especially Parise and Yandel, had already been reduced to non-factors on their respective teams. So there's really not much of an impact to either of those rosters because they're gone.
Yeah, exactly. Like Florida was benching Yandel in the playoffs. There was a time back when Ekblad was healthy that they were running like two defensemen, like Ekblad and Yandel on the top power play, along with Barkov, Huberdeau, and Hornqvist. So you could say, okay, now that Yandel is gone, there's like a better chance that there's just going to be a fourth forward on there the whole time. In the playoffs, actually, I'm seeing like Florida sometimes ran 5 forwards on the power play. I don't know if you recall that. By the way, Florida took Tampa Bay to a good series. Like Florida's now forgotten because they were eliminated in the first round. They had a really tough first round matchup going against the Lightning. But anyways, Tampa's going to be good. And I feel like, okay, I'll throw out a random name that I think benefits from this. It's like Sam Bennett now gets to hang out still on the top power play. There's not going to be 2 defensemen. They'll have Ekblad, Bennett, Barkov, Huberdeau, Hornqvist, Moi. Watch out for Sam Bennett next year. This guy's still going to be the second line center. He's still going to continue to do well. Maybe not as well as he did at the end of last year, but that was pretty awesome. Okay.
Panthers, by the way, also re-signed Anthony Duclair, which is nice to see.
I was shocked by that, Brian. That's cool. Good for him.
Yeah, I think it's great. And there's term on the deal too, which is
3
nice.
years.
Yeah, because he was working for that. He put himself out there with kind of a prove myself contract, and he did it. And I'm curious to see, I mean, through all of last year, we saw Duclair seeming to do well, but with nothing actually showing up on the score sheet. And eventually, I think that led to him losing any kind of power play opportunities he had. And he also didn't get any more shots on the top line, even though he had some for a bunch at the start of the year. So I'm curious to see if the Panthers clearly are interested in Duclair now. They're more invested in him now than they were last year. So I'm really interested to see if that correlates with some renewed opportunities for Duclair. It means that his fantasy relevance is still there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked because if you look at the playoffs, he played all 6 games for Florida, no points. The last 3 games of the series, his ice time was like 11 and a half minutes, then 10 minutes, and then like 11 minutes. So he was like barely playing. He was a 4th liner. He had a really good regular season. Like overall, he pays for like 60 points.
Yeah, and he played like almost every game he played with either Barkov or Huberdeau. There were like 4 where he played with Noel Acciari and Carter Verhaeghe, but I think those were the ones that Alex Barkov was hurt.
Right. But then in the playoffs, he did end up getting bumped down. I think once Sam Bennett came, maybe that changed things. Anyways, I don't know. I really thought that Duclair was done. I remember we did a podcast about like just talking about what happened in the first round of the playoffs. And I was like, okay, well, clearly Duclair's not coming back to Florida now. They're basically not playing him in these important games. Now they signed him to a 3-year extension. So I guess, I don't know. Good for him. We'll see how it works out. I definitely wouldn't be, I guess as a last pick, and maybe it'll be like just like training camp last year where we saw that he was playing with Barkov in training camp. So all of a sudden we got excited about Duclair. So sure, don't like spend a high draft pick on him because he could definitely fall down the lineup as we've seen. But if he's playing on that line in training camp, we've seen that he can definitely get points there. Okay. Here's a trade I really want to talk to you about. Maybe we've waited too long to get to this, but it obviously was big news around a week ago. But I found it very funny. Actually, the funniest thing about Ryan Suter being bought out was that it happened just a day after the Edmonton Oilers traded Caleb Jones and a 3rd round pick for 38-year-old Duncan Keith and his 2 years remaining with a $5.5 million cap hit. It's like, I don't know. They could have potentially gotten Suter on a cheaper deal without the acquisition cost. We also just saw that Ryan Graves got traded to New Jersey. I guess like Ryan Graves isn't the exact same type of player as Duncan Keith, but I don't know. It's just like,
no, but he's probably more useful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe he's not like as offensively inclined. Maybe he's not a power play guy. Like
and we also see, sorry to cut you off.
Okay. Go ahead. Maybe he's not like the power play guy that Duncan Keith is expected to be, but man, like I actually have a podcast scheduled tomorrow with Low Tide, Alan Mitchell, to talk about the Oilers. So I'll definitely be asking his opinion on this Duncan Keith acquisition, but we could give a little teaser here. I guess aside from this questionable decision to bring Keith in, the bottom line is that the Oilers clearly like Keith. And we know Oscar Klefbom is not returning. We've heard that. Like Tyson Barrie's a UFA. So just looking at like fantasy value, and Brian, for sure, feel free to make fun of the Oilers for making this trade, as I'm sure you want to. But like just in terms of like straight up fantasy value for next year, it's kind of like a good situation for Duncan Keith, right? Like we just saw Tyson Barrie lead defenseman in points playing on this Oilers team and getting top power play time. And sure, like he's going to have competition for the top power play, like Evan Bouchard, who's the heir apparent, but he's like, hasn't even been a full-time NHLer yet. So might take him some time. Darnell Nurse has gotten the top power play before and hasn't been able to hold the job. The Oilers are paying big money to Duncan Keith, and they just like traded Caleb Jones in a pick for him. So I don't know. I feel like this guy might get a shot. And even if he's not on the top power play, he'll still get like significant ice time. They didn't take him to play him only 18 minutes a game. He's going to be playing, with Connor McDavid and whoever. Like, anyways, I'm more into Keith for fantasy purposes next year than I was this past year. Not to say I was so high on him last year, but I could see him being like at least a 40-point guy.
Yeah, maybe not. It's a low bar to clear to be more interested in him this year than you were last year. And sure, I will be too. The same way I was more interested in Joe Thornton this year than I was the last year when I heard he was going to start in the top 6 in Toronto and be on the top power play. That didn't last. It didn't go well. And the thing with Duncan Keith is I feel like the same thing could bear out, except Edmonton and Toronto are different, where I think Toronto is ready to adjust. And also they weren't as invested. It wasn't as polarizing a move to add Joe Thornton. Everyone was like, cool, try that. Oh, it didn't work. Okay. Whereas in Edmonton, there's just so much animosity is the wrong word, but man, is it tense over there, and rightfully so. Like management keeps doing these things, and I'm not going to get too into it because anybody who wants to have heard how dumb acquiring Keith was has surely found another place to hear that by now. But Edmonton seems more like the kind of team that would want to double down on a mistake they've made, just to be like, no one can tell us what to do. And I think, honestly, that might be their only option, because in Chicago, Duncan Keith wasn't great on the power play there, even when he did get reps, which wasn't even that often last season. Granted, nobody was essentially good on the blue line on the power play in Chicago, but I'm really just not sure what Duncan Keith has to add to the Oilers. The Oilers can certainly add to Duncan Keith and help him pad his personal totals, if you want to look for or try and find the analogy, you have Tyson Barrie, who had 23 power play points in 56 games. That's a pace in an 82-game season of 34 power play points for Tyson Barrie. Now, he did some work for them. I'm not convinced Duncan Keith, given the same opportunity, can get to those same heights. And maybe that's an if, that he's even going to get that same opportunity. So I'm not that excited about Duncan Keith. I feel like Edmonton is going to be obliged to give him a shot. And then I'll say, you know what? This isn't what we had him for. We have Evan Bouchard right here who can step in. By the way, Evan Bouchard is a right-handed defenseman, Elon, like Tyson Barrie. So if he did replace Barrie on the power play, the Oilers might not have to change much about their power play setup, whereas Keith is a left-handed defenseman. So is Nurse, for what that's worth, and they've welcomed him onto the top unit from time to time. But when you talk to Alan Mitchell on Monday for our next 32 Beats interview series release, I'm pretty sure he's going to tell you how much he loves Evan Bouchard and thinks he's ready for the challenge. It's just a question of how stubborn. And I say stubborn because I feel like it's a foregone conclusion that Keith isn't going to be the optimal choice, but how committed will Edmonton be to giving Keith the opportunity versus giving it to Evan Bouchard, who the organization didn't seem, even when he showed himself to be kind of ready to take on some responsibilities, like one mistake, forget it, bench, scratch, not like so uninvolved and disconnected, like just get him out of here. So we'll see if they have more patience for him this year and do give Bouchard the opportunity to be on the top power play. Frankly, I'm not interested in Duncan Keith, maybe as a late flyer to take. But outside of that, like I would actually put him, Elon, in the similar category, maybe a bit higher, but a similar category to Kevin Shattenkirk in Anaheim last season, because like Shattenkirk had Cam Fowler was already there, but everyone was like, oh, well, Kevin Shattenkirk, Fowler hasn't done much on the power play lately. Maybe Shattenkirk can come in and pull off some of that old magic. He didn't, and then he was worthless.
Yeah, I definitely think Keith is worth a lot more than Shattenkirk in fantasy. If he's going to get like Adam just said, he's going to rack up the secondary assists. He's going to be on the ice
5-on-5, even if not on the power play.
He's going to give it to Dre. He's going to give it to McDavid. McDavid's going to burst through 3 defensemen and score goals, and Keith's going to get those assists. Plus, Duncan Keith is very good for blocks. Still, maybe even better for blocks because he's like probably losing the puck and then needing to like make up for it by blocking a shot, but whatever. I think that Duncan Keith is going to be a guy I'll be very happy to get late in my fantasy drafts.
I'd be okay to take a chance on him, but I wouldn't be thrilled about having him.
Yeah. I think like if you have set your expectations right, let me say like a 40-point defenseman that's good for blocks. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think he can hit that.
Can I just say, like, it sounds like you're almost talking about someone like Chris Russell, who is
Chris Russell doesn't get power play time. He's not a 40-point defenseman.
Maybe Keith doesn't get power play time, and I don't think Keith is a 40-point defenseman either.
Okay, well, that's my disagreement. I think he could be if he gets significant ice time on the Oilers.
You're just saying, yeah, but Chris Russell has had significant ice time.
Chris Russell is nothing like Duncan Keith. Chris Russell's just a defensive defenseman. He's never gotten more than 10 points in his life.
You're right. Chris Russell. It's not a totally fair comparison, but I feel like the argument is that, well, Keith is going to be on the ice with McDavid and Draisaitl, so he's going to get points. And I'm just trying to mention a couple guys who that hasn't been true for.
Okay, but like Duncan Keith is being brought in to be an offensive contributor, not like Chris Russell.
That's what he's being brought in to be. This doesn't mean he's gonna be.
Okay, well, I'm telling you my prediction. So do you want to put it on the bet board? Plus or minus 40-point pace?
Well, I want to see if he's trending for a top power play.
Well,
that's obviously gonna decide.
Oh, of course. That's what I'm saying. So obviously you're not that confident that he won't be if you wouldn't make the bet.
No, I'm not confident he won't be. I think I've made that clear. We'll see. I said the Oilers are the team that is likely to double down on a mistake rather than fix it.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you be excited to get him in fantasy then as a late pick?
Because I still don't know it's going to work out. It still might be a mistake.
All right, well, at some point you're going to have to draft your fantasy leagues and then we'll see what you do.
Then
all right, so
how I really feel.
Okay, so who else? Right now, we're just like, this is the middle of the summer, right? We're posing the questions, putting out the hypotheticals, and it's up to the listener to chew on it, make the decisions for themselves. We don't know what's going to happen with Duncan Keith. All I know is the Oilers traded for this guy. He's like a player that's going to play, and also I don't think that Evan Bouchard is coming in and taking the top power play day one. Maybe it's a situation where he gets it midway through the year, but he's a guy who still has to make the team before he jumps on the top power play. So baby steps here. Okay. So let's talk about some more trades. Let's finish this off here. So how about Adin Hill? went to the Sharks. We're just gonna continue talking about players who Brian is gonna just like destroy and say how dismal they are. So Adin Hill, by the way, isn't that guy. I assume he's been fine, right? He's put up a 913 save percentage in 19 appearances last year, but now the Sharks have someone else they can play instead of Martin Jones, who like Adin Hill's 913 save percentage and 19 appearances last season are like all-star numbers compared to what Martin Jones has been doing these last couple of seasons. He hasn't even cracked a 900 save percentage in the past couple of years. Brian, like this is not a high bar here, but do you think Adin Hill can do better than like Devin Dubnyk and Aaron Dell and Martin Jones have done on the Sharks recently? Like, is there any chance Adin Hill is someone that you could draft in fantasy next year and expect him to not be like just useless and terrible?
Well, that is a very low bar. So I'm going to say, yeah, there is a chance you can expect him to not be useless and terrible.
Or actually, here, let me just ask, like, just to make sure before you get into it, like, do you concur that he's going to be the starter on, like, to me, I think he's the starter on the Sharks because Martin Jones is bad.
I think he's a timeshare.
Oh, okay. Ugh.
Yeah.
Why would they keep playing Martin Jones? Just don't. He's not good.
Because they have to. There's $6 million still.
But they could play Adin Hill the majority of the time.
You're right. So we'll see. I mean, I think it starts as a timeshare, and then if Adin Hill outplays Martin Jones, he's going to get more games. But I don't know that he's going to necessarily outplay Martin Jones. Although,
oh, wow.
Again,
that's a big diss.
You're right, and maybe that's harsh. I guess so. Nothing about Adin Hill has screamed NHL starter. He had one good season as a backup. He was 918 save percentage in 13 games. That was 2 seasons ago in 2019-20. But in Hill's whole career, he's a 909 goalie, which is okay, but only 46% quality starts. And again, he hasn't seen a lot of action, even though there have been moments where, a couple goalies have been injured around him and there might have been some opportunity. For me, he looks like a backup, maybe a timeshare guy anywhere, let alone in San Jose. And it's still a big question mark, which is crazy because that's not what San Jose needed, right? They needed someone who they could count on to come in and take some games. So they're just like throwing another dart after Dubnyk and after Jones. And now you're going to throw a dart with Adin Hill and see where it lands. And I just don't see, it does seem hard that he won't outplay Jones to get games. I guess I just am not sure how consistent he can be if he is playing in a timeshare. That's the one reason I'm not sure. And how, like, Jones is super inconsistent. We saw Jones go on a crazy run last year that was like, what the heck? It was the first time he'd done anything meaningful in 3 years, but we're like, could he? So I just don't know anything about the San Jose Crease at this point. And
to be
I'm
fair,
not buying into Adin Hill.
They might still like buy out. I think when I talked to Sheng Peng, he said that they might buy out Martin Jones. Maybe they're not done, right? They buy out Jones and they get another goalie to play with Adin Hill. That's, every year that goes by, it becomes less expensive to buy out Martin Jones. Maybe it's finally time to do it.
I will say this, that if Martin Jones is bought out and it's just Adin Hill and Devin Dubnyk.
No, Dubnyk's gone.
Oh, right. Dubnyk is gone. Okay, forget it. So if they buy out Jones, then Hill is a starter and we'll see how he can do.
Well, if they buy out Jones, they're probably going to get someone else. Like they'll get a UFA.
You might be giving them too much credit at this point.
They have Melnichuk in the system. Some people say that he'll be something one day. I don't know, man. I hope they could get some good goaltending. Maybe this team, the thing is, like, we just assume now the Sharks are so bad, but it's like they've had like the worst goaltending in the league. So you wonder, but of course it's like a bit of a, like the team has some responsibility for not playing good defense to make it hard to play goalie there. But like if they had, like they've had Martin Jones and Devin Dubnyk, like maybe they could be actually a bit of a better team if they had like even just average goaltending.
It seems like a last gasp, honestly. You have Couture, you have Hurdle, you have Karlsson, you have Burns. You want to try and take another crack with these guys, but I don't think they're enough, especially with the group around them. I think it's time. Like, I think what San Jose probably should be doing is trying to collect some assets for their top players before they all completely fall off. Instead of trying to take like I just see them as treading water.
I mean, yeah,
and they're already like nose deep.
I mean, I definitely can't disagree. Like, it doesn't look good for them, but also it's like they're not going to get anything. Like, they're not going to be able to trade Burns and Karlsson like on these big contracts. I feel like they need to go for it. Like, maybe if they had made some shrewd, smart moves, they can maybe, I don't know. I think they could still be good. Like, they have some good core players, but yeah, it'll take a lot. It'll take some really good management, and they haven't shown yet that they have that, but you never know. Okay. Let's finish this off. So Nick Leddy I don't think we're gonna have much to say here. He went to the wings for Richard Panik, who was retained some of his contract in a second. So Leddy, Brian, did you even realize this? When I was researching this episode, I was like, wait, Leddy had 31 points in 56 games last year. That's a 45-point pace. Where did that come from?
We did talk about him.
I forgot.
Yeah, he went on I think it was one really long hot streak. And every week we're like, yeah, don't get invested. Yeah, don't get invested. Like, this is classic Nick Leddy. And he just kept doing it. But I wouldn't expect that to continue in Long Island or in Detroit.
Well, he won't be in Long Island.
Well, I wouldn't have expected it to happen had he stayed in. I didn't believe it then. And I don't believe it now. He had 19 assists over a 23-game span in which he took 25 shots and no goals. 19 points in 23 games, which means that the rest of the season, he had 10 points in 32 games, which is the Nick Leddy we know and don't love.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not going to be excited to draft Nick Leddy. And if anything, just though does make me a little bit less excited to draft someone like Filip Hronek, just because... Is it? I always say it wrong. Hronek, I think. No, Hronek. A little less excited to draft Filip Hronek just because maybe now he's getting bumped. If it's not Dennis Chalowski who's bumping him from the top power play, now maybe it's Nick Leddy. So who knows? Then on the Islanders, I guess if Leddy was getting power play time, now we'll see Pulock and Dobson get more power play time. But when's the last time anyone on the Islanders got power play points?
It's like we've time warped to a year ago. We're like, yeah, it could be Pulock, could be Dobson, because it looks like the Isles have moved on from Leddy. And even with opportunity, neither one really took much advantage. And like you said, it's been a long time since anybody put up significant power play points by quarterbacking the Isles power play. And we've talked about how Matt Barzal himself still doesn't put up a ton of power play points. And that's one of the reasons that his ceiling is low, because that Isles power play just is kind of low power. So I'm not looking and drooling over Pulock and Dobson. I don't look at Detroit any differently now that Leddy's there, and I don't look at the Islanders any different now that Leddy's gone.
Yeah, by the way, the Islanders might lose one of their power play guys in Eberle. They might be losing him to this expansion draft.
Yeah, but they'll keep Matt Martin, which is what's really important.
Right. Yeah. I guess they have their Kiefer Bellows and Oliver Wahlstrom. One of those guys are probably ready to take over from Eberle. Whatever. The Islanders are still going to make the playoffs and then bump the Penguins out in the first round or whatever and go on a run and eventually lose to Tampa. That's how it goes. But they'll be fine. But yeah, don't expect a lot of fantasy value there. I think we're good here, Brian. This has been so fun talking with you. I don't know. I had your Graves for Maltsev in a second, but that's obviously there's no.
You already talked about it. You just wanted to talk about how you have Maltsev on a dynasty roster.
Yeah, I got a little excited. Well, for a second, I thought to myself, ooh, now Maltsev got traded to Colorado, and the rumor is that Landeskog is, maybe on the out, so that there's an opening on the top line. I think they have better options there than Mikhail Maltsev to take that spot. Actually, I'll put it edit point. What's the name of that guy? Who's that guy that everyone's excited about on Colorado that's going to finally play? Do you remember?
Bowen Byram?
No, forward. Okay. Colorado Avalanche prospects.
Who's going to finally... Oh, Newhook.
Newhook, that's it. Yeah. Probably someone like an Alex Newhook has a better chance of cracking the top six than Mikhail Maltsev. Who had a couple good games for New Jersey at the end of the year. But okay, I'm reaching. Brian, this has been fun. We haven't had a show talking like this for a while. Look at us, right back in the saddle. An hour and 45 minutes later, and here we are. I guess we're somewhat up to date now on everything going on in the NHL. So, and then obviously we'll become out of date very quickly because in a few days, the Seattle Kraken will form their first NHL team. And then we'll have to get back on here and discuss. But yeah, it's been a blast breaking down all of this action with you. And thanks so much to everyone for listening. We really appreciate our summer listeners. You're the true fans of the show who aren't even in the middle of a fantasy season needing our advice, but you still just want to hang out with us. So we really appreciate it. And we want to hear from you. By the way, if we don't know that you're a listener, tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson, say hello. We'll definitely respond. If you want to come hang out on our Discord, we got that going, just $1 a month for our Patreon program. And you get to join our community there. We're having a lot of fun. We've been doing our rankings. We were talking about in the pre-show. Brian is participating in the rankings. A different player every single day gets picked. Today, I've got a vote on Elias Pettersson to go 40th. Brian's got a vote on John Tavares. So that's where we're currently sitting. And you'll have to, I guess, hang out in our Patreon community to find out who ends up getting ranked 40th overall. Looks like Pettersson's ahead right now in the votes.
And also, Elon invites questions from the patrons before each of his 32 Beats interviews. So if you have a question that's burning about a team we're about to do an interview with, it's a great opportunity for you to get it asked.
True. Yeah. By the way, patrons, hit me up if you want me to ask something to Alan Mitchell about the Oilers. I'm going to probably prep that show tonight. But okay, yeah. So thanks everyone again. Hope you like the show. But with that, Brian, I think we are ready to cue the outro music. And for the first time in a while, I get to ask you to go ahead and read us the credits.
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons. Logo art by BrendanWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and NBC Sports Edge.
Great job as always, Brian. Thanks again to everyone who joined us live in the chat. Shane, you're right. Broberg is another player on Edmonton, a defenseman who will likely start this year. Who knows if he could potentially take some power play time. So yeah, great job. Looking forward to talking to you next, I guess, about the Seattle Kraken at some point. But before then, I don't know. Okay, let me do this.
No, that's okay.
Okay, go from there.
But until then, But until then, much like the Seattle Kraken also invite you to do, remember that fantasy hockey is for everyone. Well, they talk about hockey. We talk about fantasy hockey. We're like the Seattle Kraken of podcasts, but not really.
Is there something I'm missing? How are we like the Seattle Kraken?
Oh, they're very inclusive.
Oh yeah? What did they do? I guess they hired like a diverse group of
exactly.
That's
and
cool.
They're getting behind a lot of inclusive and causes.
So I hope that they do well and show that it's good
works.
to do that, not only to be good people but also to have success.
I think it's such a great competitive advantage.
Yeah. Well, I'll be cheering for the Kraken. Why not?
Yeah, let's get cracking.
I never heard
We're
that
cutting
before.
all that out. I'll just say my usual thing and then you'll make it.
Oh, you don't want any of that?
Well, you can keep it if you want to.
Okay, give me a second. So I said, talk to you next time about the Kraken. Maybe when I say that, maybe you could say, oh, and also like beat writer interviews with Edmonton and Boston and Florida.
Okay. Yeah, but before then, you're probably going to have some beat writer interviews definitely for Edmonton, then Boston, Florida. We're actually hoping that a Rangers interview is coming up. Oh, and you have a Blue Jackets one too. It's a very exciting time. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for those. And while you do, remember that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
That was my Sammy Sosa.
I missed it. I can't see you on my
Isn't
screen.
it like oh yeah. What's up with that? You don't want to watch me while we podcast?
I don't have the same screen real estate that you do.
I see. Yeah, because I see your hand go up. But I guess I got a haircut for the show.
Oh, I noticed actually right off the top. Looks great.
Thanks, pal.
Good job. Who did it?
Like a professional haircutter.
Wow.
From Gents Barbershop down Bay Street.
Oh, wow.
Little free plug there for Gents Barbershop on our YouTube channel.
Maybe you can get them to sponsor us.
Might be
What's
tough.
their tagline?
First, I'll have to explain
be a gent, get a cut.
I guess the vibe there is like they play like music, like they have like music videos playing while you're getting your haircut. It's not really like my vibe, but I don't know. The haircuts
is it
are
like
fine.
Old music videos or new music videos?
No, like new music videos, like almost like you're in a club.
Oh wow. Why do you go if it's not your vibe?
Because it's nearby. And they give, I think, good haircuts.
Well, it sure looks like it. Thanks, everyone in the chat.
Yeah, this was
Brendan
fun.
And Tidbits.
All right, I guess I'll stop the
Shane
recording.
and Adam, everybody. Thanks. So
Thanks,
good to
everyone.
have you guys here.
Yeah, for sure.
To have y'all here with us.
It's a
and Jeremy.
Real pleasure. Anyone else?
I only named the last 5 commenters, or the number of commenters I get by scrolling up like half.
Do I have a way to see how many people are here? There's 13 concurrent viewers. So some people are watching.
I'm surprised that number hasn't plummeted by this point.
That might be. Oh yeah, it just went down to 11 actually.
Oh, there's Shams. Thanks, Shams.
All right, let's end the show. Bye, everyone.
Bye.